In my last video, I broke down how I learned to play quarter note triplets. Towards the end, I mentioned that my go-to reference song for quarter note triplets is Killing in the Name by Rage Against the Machine. In addition to the triplets, that song has some really cool metric modulations in its intro. So in this video, I want to show you how they work and how to follow them. Let's call this the first episode of Songs with Cool Metric Modulations. First of all, what is a metric modulation? Wikipedia defines it as a change in pulse rate and or pulse grouping which is derived from a note value or grouping heard before the change. That, I think, is a very accurate definition, but a confusing way of wording it. Metric modulation is a bit of a misnomer. Modulation just means that something changes. A key change is a modulation. Metric would imply that the meter, or the time signature, changes, but that's not necessarily the case. Some prefer to call it a tempo modulation, which is probably a more accurate term in the universal sense. For the tempo to change, the time signature doesn't also need to change, but in musical transitions that we refer to as metric modulations, they both often do. And the way it works is you have some rhythmic value in the old tempo and meter that becomes a different rhythmic value in the new tempo and meter. It's meant to be a seamless change that the passive listener likely wouldn't even notice. Like in the case of Killing in the Name. I've been listening to Rage since I was a teenager, well before I started seriously pursuing music. Because I know the song so well and I've heard it a million times, everything about it just feels natural and comfy to me, and it never dawned on me that they were doing some clever stuff until relatively recently. Before I get into the analytical stuff, I loaded the track into my DAW to try and map out the exact BPM at each shift, and I figured out that they almost certainly didn't record this to a click. Based on my interpretation of what I'm hearing, I did the math and calculated what the tempo should be at each change, but they're a little bit off the mark. They start pretty solidly at quarter equals 110, but once they get going a bit, they start to speed up and they land a little bit off from their presumed targets. That's not an uncommon thing to do, that's just the adrenaline interfering. The fact that they aren't religiously following a click makes the whole thing feel more organic and visceral, which makes sense for what the song is about. So as I go through my analysis of the intro, just keep in mind that the tempos I map out are what I believe they should be. They won't match up precisely with the original recording because they allowed the tempo to breathe a little bit. But based on what I hear, this is what I believe their intent was. Okay, let's get into it. It starts at 110 BPM. For the first four measures, we get whole note D power chords in the guitar, whole note Ds in the bass, and we're getting the quarter note beat on the open hi-hat. Super simple. The whole notes make it all feel slow and broad, and the hi-hat gives us a sense of the tempo. At measure 5, everyone drops out except the bass. The bass plays quarter note triplets outlining a minor ninth between D and E flat. In the middle of it, the rhythm gets doubled by some flams on a couple cowbells. Now here, in the fourth bar of this section, we get our first metric modulation. What I believe they were trying to do is cash in on the way quarter note triplets are often misinterpreted for this rhythm, which is a 3+3+2 subdivision. 3/16, 3/16, and 2/16, which is equal to 2 dotted eighths followed by a regular eighth, but that rhythm is better written like this, so we can still see where the beat is. Now what happens here is really tricky to notate, but the very last note in these four bars gets cut short and leads into this iconic riff. The riff starts with that 3+3+2 thing as power chords, which is followed by this cool little lick. And the bass keeps outlining the same minor ninth between D and E flat, but now in the new 3+3+2 clave instead of the straight quarter note triplets. The new tempo at this moment is 123.75 BPM, and they actually hit this bang on in the recording. They're a full 13.75 BPM faster at this point than when they started. The math here is really complicated, but here's how it works. In the last quarter note triplet, the third note gets cut short by 1/3 of its duration. That would be like if you took the triplet quarter notes, subdivided them into triplet eighth notes, so yeah, triplets within a triplet, and then lopped off the very last one from the end of the measure. This is obviously ridiculous to look at, but you'll notice that we now have groupings of 3 plus 3 plus 2. If we take these triplet within triplet eighth notes and rewrite them as 16th notes, we can write the actual played notes as 2 dotted eighths and a regular eighth. This means that a triplet quarter note in the old tempo is equal in length to a dotted eighth note in the new tempo. But we're still measuring our tempo by the quarter note, so to calculate the new tempo, we have to do a little math. In the old tempo, we have 110 quarter note beats per minute. We need to know how many triplet quarter notes we have in a minute, so we can equate that to the number of dotted eighth notes we have in a minute in the new tempo. The simplest way to get there would be to multiply 110 by 3 to give us the number of triplet eighth notes in a minute, which would be 330. Then divide that by 2 to give us the number of triplet quarter notes in a minute, so 165. Because the triplet quarter note in the old tempo is equal to the dotted eighth in the new tempo, we know we have 165 dotted eighths per minute in the new tempo. A dotted eighth is equal to 3 16th notes, so we can multiply this by 3 to get the number of 16th notes in a minute, which is 495. And since there are 4 16th notes in a quarter note, we can divide that by 4 to get our new tempo of quarter equals 123.75, 13.75 BPM faster than the old tempo. This tempo shift actually takes place on what would be the last quarter note triplet in the solo bass riff. That last note gets shortened as a pickup into the new tempo, and we get a firm snare hit right on that moment. And it all pivots around the triplet quarter note in the old tempo, equaling the dotted eighth in the new tempo. So, after 8 bars of this riff, they go back to the quarter note triplet thing from before, but the whole band hammers on the rhythm in unison. And I believe what they intended to do was shift back to the original tempo of quarter equals 110. It would be the same tempo relationship we just calculated, but going the other way. They actually played it at about quarter equals 116. That's not super off the mark. I think because the riff comes back more fully orchestrated and it's a louder dynamic, the adrenaline probably took over and they played it like a click too fast. It happens. I think it's forgivable in this case. Still sounds awesome. Now here we get another big metric modulation. Halfway through the 4th measure of this phrase, where the last quarter note triplet would happen, it gets interrupted by the vocal entering. The vocal sets the new, significantly slower tempo, and then the band comes in with the bluesy main riff. Tempo is proportional to the old one. The quarter note triplets in the old tempo are equal to the eighth notes in the new tempo. You can really hear it if you tap along with the quarter note triplets and keep tapping into the new section. Ba 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 da ba ba, killing in the name of ba da 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 do 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 do. Suddenly you're tapping out eighth notes in the new tempo. To figure out what the new tempo should be, we can do similar math as before. It's less complicated this time, though. We already know from our last calculation that if quarter equals 110, the triplet quarter note equals 165. So in the new tempo, the eighth note equals 165. Divide that by 2, you get the quarter note, which is 82.5. In the original recording, they play it at 81. Hardly any different. a couple things to note here. In none of these tempo changes does the meter also change. It's 4/4 time through all of it. This is why the term metric modulation is sometimes a bit of a misnomer. 2, in this case, the rhythm that pivots us from one tempo into another is never the pulse. Triplet quarter notes become dotted eighths, which become triplet quarter notes again, which then become eighth notes. It's super clever. The best part is it feels so natural. There's a lot of math going on behind the scenes, but unless you're really paying attention, you probably wouldn't even notice anything complicated. I don't know of any other song that pulls off metric modulations through these same rhythmic relationships. If you know of one, let me know. As a teacher, I like collecting examples of these things. Now, I know what you might be thinking, and it's a criticism I get all the time. Stop analyzing it. Just feel it, man. As someone working in the space of music education, I don't know how much you would learn from me if I didn't pull apart music like this. But obviously people write and play music all the time without this level of analytical thinking. So did Rage Against the Machine know that they were doing something really clever in this song, or did they just feel it? And my answer to that is, I don't know. Does it even matter? They still did it either way. Tom Morello, the guitarist in Rage, is a really smart guy. He allegedly practiced guitar something like 8 hours a day while attending Harvard. He knows his theory. He's a well-studied musician, so he probably had an idea of how this whole intro was pieced together in the analytical sense. As a band working out the song together, they probably had to verbally communicate with each other to work out these tempo changes so they could lock them in together. I don't know what kind of terminology they might have been throwing around. I wasn't there. But the point of analyzing it is not to enhance the listening experience, nor is it to ruin the magic of it. It's so that we, as perpetual students of music, can understand what others have done before us. That understanding can be achieved in a lot of different ways. But with that understanding, we can bring it into our own music making in whatever ways we want. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope you got something out of that. Other things, my original scale books are available on my website right now. I have some openings for private Zoom students. If that's of interest to you, feel free to message me. And with that, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.